What do you make of this coalition announcement of this one-off tax offset then?
Well, I mean, they are all over the place in terms of the policies that they're putting forward. I think Australians would have a right to feel a sense of cynicism about this policy, particularly in light of the position that the coalition took in relation to our tax cuts that we announced during the budget. But I think the important points to make, Andrew, are these. Firstly, this is temporary. It's a one-off payment. One-off payment of $1,200, which you'll get at the back end of the next financial year. So this doesn't come for some time. In terms of one-off payments, when you are looking at cost of living relief, Australians have needed it now. Like the period through which we have seen global inflation that we've been tackling over the last 3 years, which we are now starting to see us get to the other side of.
Your tax cut doesn't come for 15 months.
Yes, but let me finish. If the Liberals had had their way, Australians right now would be $7,200 worse off per household when you go across the suite of what we've done in relation to energy bill relief, what we've done in relation to tax cuts which are permanent, what we've done in relation to more affordable medicines. All of this has been opposed by the Liberals. $7,200 is what people would be worse off right now had the Liberals had their way over the last 3 years when it really mattered. And now they come forward with a one-off payment. In terms of our tax cuts, they are permanent. This is permanent tax reform. And for the average household, for the average income earner, we're talking about tax cuts of $2,500 each and every year. Not one-off, but each and every year. They're talking about a one-off buy of.
But do they have a point when they say their tax cut and the fuel excise cut is more fiscally responsible? It's not baked into the budget. Where you're running huge deficits.
Today, they're spending $10 billion on this one initiative in the course of the next 15 months. Now, they don't tell us where that $10 billion
Well, you're spending $7.5 billion a year on tax cuts.
And if you look at all the decisions that we have made and all the savings that we have made during the course of the last 3 years, we're $207 billion ahead of what we inherited from the Liberals, saving $60 billion of debt. Debt interest.
Mr. Marles, you're also promising a decade of deficits. Let's face it.
We inherited deficits as far as the eye could see when we came to government. I mean, relative to what we inherited, and that's what you get to manage. We're $207 billion better off. The debt is $170 billion. They're saving $60 billion over the decade in terms of interest payments. That's what we've done. And of course, in the course, we've delivered 2 surpluses as part of that.
All right.
That's what we're doing in terms of responsible management. They're doing $10 billion today over 15 months, and there is no explanation as to how they're paying for it. And what Australians know, is that how they'll pay for it is through massive cuts to frontline services. So what they'll give you through this, they'll be taking away through cuts to Medicare.
All right. Well, let's talk about then this policy that keeps getting rumoured that they haven't yet announced, where they're going to lift defence spending. Obviously, as Defence Minister, you'd like to lift defence spending, I assume. I mean, Kim Beazley says you should have more in the way of defence spending. So what's your reaction to that, if they come out and announce that?
They made an art form when they were in government and when Peter Dutton was the Defence Minister of making announcements and putting no dollars behind it. When we came to government in terms of defence, $42 billion worth of commitments without a cent behind them. It meant that a full quarter of what Defence was expected to purchase, it had no money for. That's how they managed the defence budget. What we got in the budget reply was an announcement that they will make an announcement at some point during the campaign, and it doesn't appear to be today. We go to the election date is just weeks away, and they still haven't come up with a defence policy. And right now, they still haven't backed Labor's increases in defence spending. And here's the other point, Andrew. In terms of defence spending, we have increased it by $57 billion over 10 years, $10.6 billion over the forward estimates. If you look at what we're spending now, in the last financial year, Defence spent more on procurement than it had ever spent and will spend more again this year. So now, over the forwards, over the 10 years, we are spending more on defence, and together that represents the biggest increase in defence spending in peacetime Australian history. Now, none of it has been supported by the coalition.
You'd like more, wouldn't you?
Well, we have put more in the budget, and we are lifting defence spending relative to what we inherited from the Liberals.
But if you had extra money, what would you spend it on?
Well, what we've got is strategic clarity as well, and we've made really clear that we need to be building a defence force which has the capacity to project. That's why we're obviously focused on having a long-range submarine, but it's why we're also focused on having longer-range missiles, having a more mobile army, a more amphibious army, having a base on which we can send our planes further, which is about investing in our northern bases. The Liberals don't have strategic clarity. I mean, Peter Dutton is out there peddling a lie around $80 billion of defence cuts. He's said that 25 times now. It is just a flat-out lie and bears no relationship to what the budget papers say. What we have done is reprioritise $78 billion worth of spending in defence, and that is so that we have a much sharper spend in respect of our defence and a spend which has greater quality.
A few suggestions over the past few days out of the US that AUKUS could be at risk because of the tariffs on steel and aluminium. We've seen the volatility of Donald Trump. Isn't there a danger he could just pull the plug on AUKUS?
AUKUS is in the strategic interests of the United States. And one thing that we've seen from President Trump is a focus on the interests of the United States. And what we've seen in my meeting with Pete Hegseth more than a month ago now, there was really strong support for AUKUS, and that's been demonstrated by Republicans, Trump Republicans, in their behaviour, their voting behaviour in the United States.
Well, you were handing him $500 million at the time. Presumably that helps. I mean, what was that for, and why are we giving them money for something that's years away? Well,
because firstly, it does help. And this is the point that it is in the strategic interests of the United States. What we need to do is see a much greater rate of production of Virginia-class submarines in the United States for the United States. That creates the room for the transition of Virginia-class submarines to Australia. This was all announced in March of 2023. This was the first down payment in relation to that. I mean, it is unprecedented in terms of how two countries work together, and it is utterly acknowledged by the American government, by the Trump administration. And so, I get that people are going to constantly ask the question about AUKUS, and that's, maybe that's fair enough in the sense that this is a multi-decade, multi-billion-dollar program. But when you look at what people are saying here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, there is support across the political spectrum, and there is with the Trump administration.
Andrew Hastie, your counterpart, seems to have an issue with his comments in relation to women in combat, according to Labor anyway. What do you make of that?
Well, Andrew Hastie's gone missing in this election campaign. That's and in terms of the position that the opposition have in relation to defence, that's a worry right there. I mean, Ben Britton, their disendorsed candidate for Whitlam, was disendorsed apparently because of comments that he made about women not being able to, should not be able to participate in combat roles in the Defence Force. He said that his position was the same as Andrew Hastie's. Now, on the day that he said that, I stood up and asked Andrew Hastie to clarify that point. We needed to hear from the alternative Defence Minister about his view in respect of that. And rather than clarifying it, he doubled down on comments that he made 7 years ago, where that is exactly his view. Now, I think that's untenable for an alternative Defence Minister. There are 460 women today in combat roles who meet the requirements to serve in those combat roles.
So you don't think, just to get clarity on this, you don't think Andrew Hastie, given his comments, can be Defence Minister?
I think it is untenable that he is saying in respect of 460 servicewomen who meet the criteria to participate in combat roles, that despite the fact that they meet the criteria, because they are women, they should not be able to serve in that role. They should not be able to do that job. It's 2025, and this is the position that an alternative Defence Minister from the Liberal Party is saying in relation to our Defence Force.
Where are
we
those
need
400?
Every person that we can get in all the roles, including combat roles.
Where are those 460 serving, briefly?
Oh, well, they're in the army and around the country, but in combat roles, in infantry roles. and they meet the criteria. This is the important point.
The physical tests and so forth.
Exactly. And so what you're saying is that in respect of 460 people who are currently doing the job, who meet the criteria, they can't do their job anymore because they're women. And this is a position which is being put forward by Andrew Hastie in 2025. Now, he really needs to be clear about this. And you know, one of the candidates of the Liberal Party was disendorsed for saying those exact
apparently
comments
for other comments we've heard. But anyway, look, I just want to move on. When Jacinta Price gets up yesterday here in Western Australia and says, make Australia great again, do you rub your hands with glee? Because Donald Trump seems to be hurting Peter Dutton's campaign.
Well, I mean, what we're focused on is our own policies, our own ideas for Australian conditions and based on what this country needs and putting them forward. Like, we don't need to borrow our ideas from overseas, and yet what we are seeing from Peter Dutton is a whole lot of cut and paste in terms of what he's putting to the Australian people today from what we've seen overseas, and we certainly don't need to be borrowing slogans. You know, we've got the wit to work out what we're going to say to the Australian people without having to look elsewhere. This has been a cut and paste campaign from the Liberal Party, both in terms of how they're communicating to the Australian people and the policies that they're putting forward.
Just finally and briefly, as I mentioned, you're hot favourites now to win the election. What do you make of that? What do you put it down to? And Peter Dutton was out there yesterday saying there are actually a lot of 50-50 seats. Is that what you believe as well, that it's pretty tight still?
I think it is tight, and you know, no one's cast a vote yet. And betting markets don't determine the outcomes of elections. You know, we are.
I guess we learnt that in 2019.
Yeah, and in a sense. It will sound trite coming from a politician. It's a bit like the coach of a football team that you take it a match at a time. But literally, that's what we need to do. That's what we're focused on doing. An election is an exercise of having a conversation with the Australian people about what matters to them. We are focused on that in terms of what we've done over the last 3 years, but what we still want to do over the next 3, and why that represents an opportunity, a proposition to the Australian people to re-elect Anthony Albanese as the next Prime Minister. Betting markets, polls, they'll take care of themselves. We're focused on that conversation.
Richard Marles, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.